The security guard didn't even look at my invitation. He just glanced at my heels, my off-the-rack navy dress, and the last name on the guest list tablet before saying, "You're not on the list, ma'am. This event is for members and executive guests only." I remember the way people in line behind me shifted uncomfortably, the way a woman in pearl smirked, the way the guard's tone changed when the couple behind me said they were with Davenport Holdings. Davenport Holdings. My company. But I didn't say that. Not yet. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the latest stories. I stepped aside, pretending to check my phone, while humiliation burned up my neck. 10 years ago, I had worked at this very country club as a banquet server. I carried trays of champagne for people who never looked me in the eye. Tonight, I was supposed to be here as a keynote sponsor for their annual investment gala. Only no one seemed to know that. Or maybe they just didn't expect someone like me. The guard repeated himself when I approached again. "Ma'am, unless your name is on the executive sponsor list, I can't let you through." That's when I saw it. Across the massive LED screen inside the ballroom entrance, visible through the glass doors, my company logo lit up in bright gold letters. Davenport Holdings, lead sponsor. And beneath it, keynote address. Madison Carter, CEO. The guard's face changed first. Then the event coordinator sprinted toward the door. Then suddenly, the same people who avoided eye contact were staring at me like I'd just materialized out of nowhere. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I simply held up my phone, opened the event email confirmation, and said calmly, "I believe you're waiting for me." But what none of them knew was this. This wasn't just about attending a gala. This was about walking back into a place that once made me feel invisible and reminding them exactly who they underestimated. And I had waited years for this moment. 10 years earlier, I was 19 and desperate. My mom had just been diagnosed with lupus, and medical bills were stacking up faster than I could count. College wasn't an option anymore. So I took the first job that would hire me, the Rosewood Country Club. If you've never worked at a high-end country club, let me explain something. You are invisible. Members don't learn your name. They snap their fingers instead of speaking. They talk about million-dollar deals in front of you, like you're part of the furniture. I worked weddings, retirement parties, investment dinners. I memorized wine pairings I could never afford. I watched executives shake hands over contracts worth more than my entire neighborhood. That's where I first heard the name Davenport Holdings. At the time, it was a mid-sized logistics firm trying to expand. The CEO back then, Richard Davenport, was charismatic and ruthless. He held meetings at Rosewood regularly. And one night, I accidentally overheard something that changed my life. Two board members were discussing how they'd passed over a proposal from a young female analyst. They said she was too aggressive and didn't understand her place. I remember thinking how familiar that sounded, because just earlier that week, a member had complained that I walked too confidently for waitstaff. Walked too confidently. That stuck with me. I started paying attention, listening, learning. After my shifts, I'd go home and Google every business term I heard. I took free online courses. I studied supply chain management at 2 a.m. after double shifts. And one night, while clearing glasses after another Davenport dinner, Richard himself stopped me. "You're always listening," he said. I froze, thinking I was in trouble. Instead, he handed me a business card. "If you're going to eavesdrop," he added with a half smile, "at least make something of it." That card became my first internship. Unpaid. But it was my way out. And I swore to myself that I would never be invisible again. The internship was brutal. I wasn't from the right schools. I didn't dress the right way. I didn't have the right last name. And people reminded me of that constantly. There were meetings I wasn't invited to until someone needed coffee. Ideas I pitched that were ignored until a male colleague repeated them 10 minutes later, and suddenly they were brilliant. I learned quickly. I stopped asking for validation. I started documenting everything. I built models no one else wanted to build. I stayed late. I volunteered for failing projects. Eventually, one of those failing projects became my opportunity. Davenport Holdings had invested in a small regional distribution startup that was bleeding money. Everyone expected it to collapse. I asked for control of the restructuring plan. They laughed. But Richard didn't.
Let her try, he said.
For 8 months, I lived in spreadsheets and warehouses. I renegotiated contracts. I rebuilt supplier relationships. I cut waste. I redesigned routing systems. And slowly, quietly, it turned around. The startup became profitable within a year. That was the first time the board said my name without hesitation. But success creates enemies. When Richard announced he was stepping down 5 years later, the board assumed his successor would be one of the senior male executives. Instead, Richard recommended me. The backlash was immediate. She's too young. She's emotional. She doesn't represent the brand. But numbers don't lie. And the shareholders voted. I became CEO at 32. The same week, Rosewood Country Club sent Davenport Holdings an invitation to sponsor their annual investment gala. They addressed it to Mr. Carter. They assumed. I didn't correct them. Instead, I signed the highest sponsorship tier they offered and requested a keynote slot. Not for revenge. At least that's what I told myself. But when I saw the venue name printed on the confirmation email, I knew exactly why I said yes. Back at the entrance, the event coordinator was suddenly breathless. "Miss Carter, we are so sorry. There must have been a misunderstanding." Of course there was. The same manager who once scheduled my shifts was now overseeing the gala. He recognized me. I could see it in his eyes. Recognition. Then discomfort. Inside the ballroom, the lights dimmed as I walked in. Conversations softened. The massive screen behind the stage displayed my company logo again. The woman in pearls from earlier avoided my gaze. When I reached the podium, I took a breath. I actually started my career in this building. I began. A few polite chuckles. I carried trays at tables just like yours. Silence. I learned a lot here. Mostly about what it feels like to be underestimated.
No anger. No bitterness.
Just truth. I spoke about access. About opportunity. About how talent doesn't always arrive wearing designer labels. Then I paused. 10 years ago, I wasn't allowed in certain rooms here, I said. Tonight, my company is funding the renovation of your entire small business mentorship program. Murmurs filled the room. But I continued. There's one condition. Now I had them. Every year, Rosewood will sponsor 5 local students from working-class backgrounds for paid business internships.
No ampad labor.
No assumptions about where they belong. The board members exchanged glances. They needed the funding. Rosewood had been struggling quietly for years. I smiled. I believe in investment, I said. Especially when others don't see the value yet. The applause started slowly. Then it grew. And for the first time in that building, I wasn't invisible. I wasn't revenge-hungry either. I was in control. After the speech, the security guard approached me again. His posture was different this time. "I'm sorry about earlier, ma'am," he said quietly. I looked at him and saw something familiar. Not arrogance. Just someone following instructions in a system built on assumptions. "It's okay," I told him.
You were doing your job.
Because the truth is, my revenge was never about humiliating a guard. It wasn't even about embarrassing the club. It was about changing the rules of the room. Over the next year, Rosewood launched the internship program. 5 students became 10. 10 became 20. Davenport Holdings partnered with 2 more clubs across the state. And every time I walked into a boardroom after that, I remembered the feeling of being stopped at the door. Not as pain, as fuel. Richard called me a week after the gala. "You handled that better than I would have," he admitted. I laughed. "That's because I didn't need to win the room," I said. I already owned it. Sometimes people expect revenge to be loud.
Petty.
Destructive. Mine wasn't. Mine was walking past the same doors that once shut me out and holding them open for someone else. And if you had told 19-year-old Madison, the girl clearing champagne glasses at midnight, that one day her name would light up that ballroom screen, she wouldn't have believed you. But she would have kept listening. And she would have kept walking confidently. No matter who told her not to.